Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Bold Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Brandon Busteed, Chief Partnership Officer and Global Head of Learn Work Innovation at Kaplan. And I'm excited to have one of my awesome colleagues with me today, Dr. Andrew Temte, who is Kaplan's Global Head of Corporate Learning, and somebody that I've had the privilege and honor of working with the past 2.5 years that I've been here. And we're going to be talking about his new book, Balancing Act. There's a ton of wisdom in this book, as I would have expected knowing Andy's career here. But Andy, let's just start real quick. Tell everybody a little bit more about you and your background and about the roles that you've had at Kaplan over the past 20 plus years.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I'm thrilled to be here. I've been watching Bold Leaders in Learning for a while and wanting to get involved. So thanks so much for having me. No, back in November 22nd, 1999, my business, the Swayzer Study Program, which was started by my mentor, Carl Swayzer, was purchased by Kaplan. And, I thought that I'd been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug and thought that, Carl was retiring and I'll stick around for a few years, make sure that the business finds its sea legs within Kaplan. And now almost 22 years later, I've had the distinct privilege of leading professional education businesses. I've had a stint as a college president. I was the dean of the School of Continuing Education for the former Kaplan University, and also the president of its College of Business and Technology. So, Kaplan has been such a wonderful place for me to grow my career and really have multiple careers within one organization.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us at Kaplan who can relate to that. As a large, global, and highly diversified education organization, you can have, 10, 20 careers inside the same organization. So I'm obviously on the early end of that, 2.5 years in. So, but in any event, your book titled Balancing Act, the subtitle is Teach, Coach, Mentor, Inspire. And those are not often words you hear in a book about business and corporate learning and things like that. But so tell us a little bit about those words, because I know they're very important to you and they're thematic across the book.
Yeah. So as my father is an educator, my mother was a corporate trainer during her career. So I come at the education industry, very honestly from my upbringings as a child. And I saw both of my parents, certainly teaching and coaching, and the benefit that has for not only the people that surround them, but the broader community. It took me quite a few years to really connect the dots of what that meant. And it really over the last kind of 10, 12 years that went upon the adoption of my own personal continuous improvement journey and really the emphasis of my lifelong learning journey, as well as the adoption of organizational health principles in the businesses that I've run, that those 4 words really came together for me. To me, Brandon, it means that we all have an obligation to be teachers, especially as we advance in our careers. It becomes less about us and more about the team members that surround us, helping them achieve new heights. You do that through coaching. Coaching is, very kind of episodic and more short term in nature. Then there are the mentors that surround us. Those are more rare. Those are, individuals who have made a real lasting impact on our lives. And then this concept of inspiration, it can be fleeting. is very ill-defined. You never know when you're going to be inspirational in a given day. You don't wake up and go, I'm going to be inspirational today. It just doesn't work that way. But if you focus on teaching, giving back to others, coaching, and focusing on your mentorship relationships, and really defining those, the inspiration will come as a result of those interactions. So to me, 4 words that seem a little disconnected from one another, they all come together and make perfect sense, at least in this brain.
Yeah, and I love the overlap of the concepts of teaching and coaching and mentoring because, I mean, obviously we're in the world of education. We're involved in education across all kinds of age levels and for different contexts, right? Supporting schools, universities, and corporate learning, right? And you think about, how all important those kinds of elements are. I mean, some of the best corporate learning, folks are, they're teachers by nature, and in the best managers, interestingly enough, employ some of the same strategies that the best teachers do in terms of how they coach and support students, how they do individualization in terms of trying to understand how each person is motivated and how they might need to be supported differently than just everything applies to everybody, kind of blanket type policy or strategy. So I love the subtitle of the book. You share a lot of stories in there, and one of the things I think is just fascinating about you is that you're obviously you've had a background in teaching really difficult financial concepts and financial acumen and accounting, and yet you're also a rock star. Maybe you just tell us a little bit about your dual career as a rock star by night and accounting guru by day.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about multidimensionalism. I have been in my past all about one thing, and that can be helpful for short periods of time. That deep focus, but over an extended period of time, it's actually quite damaging. It puts you professionally, squarely into a box. It limits your ability to grow. So I really like to encourage folks to adopt, to make sure that they're doing other things in their lives and following their passions. Mine happens to be singing in front of large groups of people with an electric guitar hung around my neck, with big lights and big sound. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that for both myself and for others. But it's a concept that's extensible to really anybody in the business world. Is don't be all about one thing in your life, and make sure that you open your mind to all the wonderful things that you can do for yourself, your family, and your community.
Yeah, I love the multidimensionalism and thinking about hobbies as things that are enhancements to careers, not detractors, right? Because they do provide that outlet and the longevity that might not be otherwise sustainable. So speaking of sustainability and longevity, the topic of lifelong learning is just a prevalent conversation at the higher education level, within corporate learning. We're talking about things like reskilling revolutions. And last week we had Jamie Marasotis on the show. And one of the conversations we got into was that he said, the term lifelong learning for some working adults sounds more like a prison sentence than something that's really exciting and inviting. And he went on to say, that it also sounds like I'm going to spend a lot of money on college, another thing that doesn't sound very attractive. And one of the things I've heard you talk about often and write about is what you call the clay layer or the permafrost within organizations as one of the real big challenges to lifelong learning and reskilling and upskilling. Tell us more about what you mean by the clay layer or the permafrost.
Yeah, so the permafrost in an organization is that layer of management that has effectively become stuck. These are individuals who started out their careers with fantastic aspirations and very, very motivated to continue to learn and grow. And then various forms of quote unquote life has happened to them. Children come along, the death of a spouse or a parent, a bad boss has deeply impacted them. And the fixed, we talk a lot about fixed mindsets versus growth mindsets. The threat of others coming in and moving over you and growing more than you as a manager and leader starts to take hold, and that threat is deeply concerning. So this is the layer of middle management in an organization that abhors change, and either consciously, and in most cases subconsciously, actively works to avoid change. So senior management can build the most awesome plans in the world, and when it comes to cascading those plans and that change, who is going to implement it? It is the middle management of the organization that's going to do the implementation. So this concept of permafrost and the clay layer is a purposeful mental image that we want to kind of folks to think about, because what happens when water and nutrients hit clay? What happens when they hit the permafrost? Well, they roll off and they don't get absorbed, and those nutrients don't get really absorbed into the soil of the organization. So to, not to push the metaphor too far, but to really have great soil for the roots of the organization to grow and new things to be happening in the organization, it is the clay layer that prevents a lot of that. And this relates back to the concept of lifelong learning, because again, who is going to drive learning and growth within their teams? It is those same middle managers.
All right, we had a somewhat related question. One of our listeners has joined us today, Mark Pell, says, Andy's a great leader that I had a short opportunity to work with. He says, my question, Andy, is how do you keep yourself motivated personally? So when you think about this for yourself, what tips or wisdom would you offer?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, is that multidimensionalism that I talked about before. No, I don't like to speak in absolutisms. It actually bothers me, but sometimes it is necessary. But making the time for self-reflection, and I talk a lot about vulnerability and self-reflection and making time for oneself in the book. It is important to make that time. And I use rock and roll as you can't imagine the things that I'm thinking about at practice or when I'm up on stage. It's not all, it opens up the creative mind, and it allows for connections to be made in my mind that normally wouldn't be there. So I use rock and roll. You could use exercise. You could use any one of a number of things to do that. Or your vacations should not be jam-packed with endless activities. Make the time for yourself to sit on the beach, look out at the water and the waves crashing, and think about yourself and think about the challenges and the opportunities that you faced, the things that you could have done maybe differently, maybe a little better, and use your continuous improvement tools and the concepts of organizational health to focus first on yourself, then take those things back to the team, so that you're really engaging the whole of both yourself and your organization. But for me, it's that multidimensionalism that allows for that kind of creativity and self-reflection.
Yeah, and we don't need to touch on it here, but one of the things you talk about in the book is distracted employees and how tethered we are to mobile devices, and we're not even paying attention at conferences and at meetings. We're not really listening fully because we're multitasking and texting. And it's just, for as much as we're all aware of this, right, it takes really active, intentional behaviors to change it. And so it's just I think it's a powerful reminder that, all of us probably need to really work at it as opposed to just assume. Yes.
This is how I write LinkedIn posts. They come to me in the middle of the day, and then I write them on Post-it notes. And this is a future post, but today I will be intentional versus the autopilot that I find myself, especially in times of isolation and COVID. It is so easy to just get on autopilot and just keep doing the same things over and over. And it's hard to be intentional.
Yeah. One of the, things that you talk about are, personal continuous improvement journeys. So on this topic, and within the book, you talk about the 4 competencies that you call the future ready workforce. Can you tell us about those 4 competencies and why you think they're so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first is what I like to call human skill. I'm on I think it's more than a one-man mission to eliminate the term soft skill from our vernacular. I think soft skill makes the hardest skills out there seem irrelevant, and why bother? So vulnerability, empathy, stewardship, these are all absolutely critical for our success in a future workforce where computers will be thinking at ever increasing levels of cognitive ability, taking parts of our jobs that it's easy to code for, easily replicable by computers that that can think at those low cognitive levels. So what do we have to bring to the world of work but our human selves? And that's why I like to call it human skill, because it directly relates back to me as an individual and how I interact with those around me. If we continue to call it soft skills, we're not doing anybody any favors, and we're minimizing the impact that will have. So much of the book is about human skill, and I try to be very vulnerable in the book and show others that it's safe, that you can create safe places to be vulnerable personally and within your teams, and you can all be better off for it. The other 3 are more on the hard skill side of things, that we should also not be talking about them as hard skill. But the first is data literacy. Now, I'm not talking about data science. I'm talking about data literacy because there's this new adage that's going around that data is the new oil, right? That it's data is more valuable than oil. Well, data is not really more valuable than oil, because data by itself is absolutely meaningless. Like oil, it needs to be refined into other applications, like plastics, like gasoline, like diesel, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's Earth Day, and so I'm not saying that that oil is necessarily awesome, but it is part of our lives, and we are where we are. But back, throw that adage out. But the data with meaning and context, now that's of real value. And should that all be managed by some team that's down the hall, that's some small team that's going to make all that the sense of data for us? No. all of us within businesses need some level of literacy in data to be able to activate it and have it come to life and have meaning for our business, right? So that's number two. Number three, as a finance guy, I'm very, very passionate about financial acumen within our businesses is really in a state of frankly, of crisis. If you as a leader go around to your teams and your team members and really truly dig deep on who knows about the profit and loss statement and the balance sheet and how assets are utilized within the business, you as a leader will be shocked, because I have been in the past, at the inability of the average leader in an organization to truly understand how the language of business works. And the language of business is mathematics. The language of business is finance and accounting. And again, you don't need to be an accountant, but you need some degree of acumen in finance to ultimately be successful as a manager and a leader. And then the final one is commercial acumen. Commercial acumen, some people might think that financial acumen and commercial acumen are the same thing, but they're not. Commercial acumen is how all of the functional areas of the business interact with one another. So you might live in the world of accounting and you're counting beans all day, every day, but you're not taking that step back and going, oh, wow, how is the work that I'm doing ultimately impacting the customer? Because it does. Everybody in the company, whether you like to think this way or not, has some line to the ultimate consumer of your product or service. And it's just a travesty if your team members do not understand how the business functions cross-functionally and how the product is ultimately delivered and consumed by the consumer. So I could talk literally for hours about those things, but I think that's enough.
Well, and as you were talking, like, first of all, I haven't really, I've seen many lists of like the skills of the future and all that kind of stuff. And yours is a really unique one. I mean, obviously there's overlap with the human skills component of what you have, because, everybody's got that packaged in a slightly different way, but the financial acumen and commercial acumen points are really, I think, really relevant, and not just to businesses, because as you were talking about both of those, I was thinking about colleges and universities, and how little the people who work at colleges and universities actually understand the financial, guts behind the organization. Like, how do they actually work? Like, students think that, they're paying tons for tuition. They are in many respects, but it's like, at most places, it's a sliver of the overall cost to deliver their education, because it's being subsidized by federal, state sources. I mean, all kinds of other philanthropic donations, right? So, but like the average faculty member, do they understand the finances of the organization? Or to your point, the equivalent of commercial acumen within a university? How do these functions really sit? Where does student affairs and academic affairs come together? How does career services nest in all this stuff, right? And if you're completely disconnected from all of that, it's a problem, right? So
yeah, I'm going to be really controversial right now, because there are some faculty members, and I've talked to them, these are real data points, believe that, that somehow an institution is not a business. An educational institution is a business, and it has to be operated like one, as are certain government entities. Yeah. Then all the concepts of business, commercial acumen, financial acumen, data literacy, all the human skills that we talked about, those are equally applicable on college campuses as they are within businesses. Now, the motivation of education as a public good, it changes the conversation maybe a little bit, but I'm telling you, the cost of tuition generally would be lower than it is today if we had a bit more commercial acumen and financial acumen in our academic institutions.
Yeah, and one of our great partners, Purdue University, has put on a clinic for higher ed about this, where they've been able to freeze tuition for 10 consecutive years, making a Purdue education less expensive now than it was a decade ago in terms of real dollars. It's been remarkable, and huge kudos to Purdue, of course. But if a large public land grant university can do that, so can every other university, quite frankly, if they put that intentionality behind it. So I'm glad we kind of covered those points. One of the things I wanted to make sure I asked you about before we run out of time is you're involved in a task force with the World Economic Forum. And I would love to hear what that task force is, what kind of work it's doing, because it has some real exciting potential in terms of impact for the world of learning.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to serve on the Skills Consortium at World Economic Forum. And, World Economic Forum is partnered with some really awesome institutions over the last few years to identify the reskilling needs of the global population. We talked before about computers that can and will be able to think at ever increasing cognitive levels into the future, and the job disruption that technology will create. The job opportunity that it also creates. You can think of it glass half empty or glass half full. I prefer to think of it as a glass that's half full and increasing. But they've identified a need for up to 1 billion people to need to be reskilled over the next 10 years. Now, reskilling and upskilling are different things. Upskilling is more skill within an existing job. Reskilling is skilling for a different job, right? 1 billion people over the next 10 years. Even if they're wrong by 50%.
Yeah.
That's a huge number and a huge task in front of us. So I serve on this thing called the Skills Consortium with other, representing Kaplan alongside other major online learning organizations. And, ultimately, World Economic Forum want to create a global marketplace for more short, sharp reskilling that doesn't take years to change jobs and careers, but months to do so in that effort to reskill 1 billion people. I'm bummed out that we're almost at time, because we should now be talking about alternative credentials and alternative pathways to workplace competency that sit alongside degrees. Gosh, Brandon, you and I could talk for hours on this stuff.
Well, we could extend it today. I'm sure we could keep going, and we'll see how many people hang in with us. But on this last point in segue, right? One of the articles I wrote in Forbes last weekend was about the difference between lifelong learning and what I call the skill seekers, right? Those who are trying to upskill or reskill. Now, all of us could be one or both of those at any given point in time. But the point I was trying to make is that lifelong learning, right? The motivation of a lifelong learner is very different than the motivation of somebody who's trying to be skilled in something, right? Lifelong learning, it's for intellectual fulfillment, it's for fun, it's for, right? And I don't necessarily need the credential, right? I'm doing it for other kinds of fulfillment. In the skill seeking category, it's, I want a raise, I want a promotion, I want a better job, I want a new job, whatever that might be. And the reason why I said the distinction is so important is because there's a lot of well-intentioned efforts where we put so much potential content in front of somebody. Think of the smorgasbord on some of the MOOC platforms, right? Many courses could be really good courses, but there's so many that for the skill seeker, you kind of confuse them because there's too many options, right? Like what the skill seeker needs is the path of least resistance, the most direct route, the fastest, most effective route. And I think it's an important lesson that, in your work at Kaplan, I think you've done a very good job of leading the organization in a way where we're serving students where we are meeting what they are specifically looking for. So instead of too many options, right, that become overwhelming and distracting, it's like, you want to get here, here's the direct path. We're going to do it as effectively as possible. So I hope that's part of what the World Economic Forum group is thinking about as well, because I worry we get to this place where, 1 million unique credentials in the United States, that sounds great until you realize that like 0.0001% of them move the needle economically for somebody. I want to know what the needle in the haystack is.
Yeah, we've got to bring higher education institutions and professional credentialing bodies closer together, because professional credentialing bodies like the CFA Institute, like AICPA, they've been at this for decades. And we've got to bring these alternative credentials from 1 million plus and boil them down into something that's useful. When I in mid 90s, when I was in higher education, higher ed looked down their nose at professional credentialing bodies. Oh yeah, well that's something you can do after you graduate. There's a real marriage that needs to happen so that credentials are either woven into degree programs. You and I talk about cred degree, right? Stacking credential, industry recognized credentials on top of degrees. But you have the same problem there that you described before of the lifelong learner thinking that, oh, I'm just in this for more cost and potentially more time. So there's a way to put both of them together to be more efficient and effective, using our boss Andy Rosen's terminology, the fastest path to the results that matter. And that's really what we need to be focused on. We don't need 1 million alternative credentials. We need several thousand, maybe several tens of thousands for all the myriad jobs that are out there. But it's currency. What I've done this work. How do I then trade this for a better job, a promotion, more money, more opportunity for myself and my family?
Well, I wish we had more time. We knew we were going to run into this problem. But first of all, Dr. Rockstar Andrew Temte, thanks for joining us today. For those of you who haven't picked it up yet, go get The Balancing Act. It's a fun read, and it's a really important one. So thanks for being our guest today, and I'll look forward to continuing our conversation on LinkedIn and in many other fashions.
Thank you, Brandon.